Hello and welcome back. So yesterday I had a video about teamwork, and I should have thought of it at the time. There's another major frustration people have in working with teams and collaborators, and that is a feeling that when I do it, I have to do everything. And there are several sort of problems with this, tricks going on that get played on us that contribute to this effect. Now I want to just kind of break those down today because otherwise there's natural questions to follow. Yesterday's thoughts about teamwork and the way we see flaws in each other's work and how that surfaces productive, creative tension and so on. So one of the first most common causes for this is actually an effect that's pretty well documented in terms of when people have interviewed spouses about who does the most around the house. And these are, I don't know how else to describe it, functional couples. These aren't necessarily people who are seeking help because they're in massive disagreements. These are pretty ordinary circumstances to be in. Husbands and wives, or maybe husbands, wives and wives, are asked, the spouses are asked, hey, who does the most work in the house? And they're asked separately to kind of gauge on a percentage. And if you combine their percentages, you get way over 100%. Both of them think that they do more. Whether one's doing laundry and one's doing dishes and one's mowing a lawn and one's vacuuming and one's, I don't know, taking out the recycling and one's, you name the chores, there's an effect that what happens is the part that we do, we are 100% conscious of because that's the part we do. The part that somebody else completely takes care of for us and we don't do, we don't think about. It's not on our mind. We don't have easy access to how long that takes, the effort involved, the grossness involved, the difficulty, the complications, the challenges, the repair work, the whatever the thing, we don't see it. And so the same thing happens where, and again, I've seen this out of small student teams and club teams and professional industry teams and games, where it just kind of is taken for granted that art just happens if you're not on the art team. Now, obviously, that's their full-time concern. It's extremely time-consuming, the work that they do. The modeling, the shaping, the feedback, the iteration, the animations, the color considerations. There's tons of work that literally can fill their full work days, plus sometimes additional hours too. Likewise, sometimes they take for granted the audio just happens. It just appears. It just exists. And obviously, again, too, in those cases, there are full-time audio professionals who put a ton of work into what they do. Very monotonous work, very time-consuming, very effortful, very, very deeply involved in a way that it's hard to really appreciate. And this is even, the effect is even more exaggerated in those kind of cases. Because part of what happens, too, is that when we talk about, okay, who does the most work around the house? It's just kind of our, like I say, a canonical, well-researched example of it always adds up to more than 100%. Both people think they do more than half. In that case, at least, typically, either person could interchange for the other, because the kind of stuff we're talking about, you don't need a special background to clean dishes. You don't need a special background to vacuum carpet. Human beings know how to do this stuff, or by adulthood, should darn well have figured it out. In the case of professionals, or people who are deeply specialized, we can't even fathom what someone could spend 4 years studying how to do that thing would do, or where we would even spend the time to make the sound effects better if we had all day, every day to focus on doing that. And obviously, to non-coders, a lot of what happens from the coding side is kind of magic. Like, they're not, it's not even, can't even guess and haven't worried about how or why all that stuff works, and scalability and reliability and security, and doesn't even cross their minds the depth and complexity and difficulty being tackled, because it hasn't been theirs to worry about, which means that we underappreciate it. We don't see the work that's going on. So anyway, to tie it back to the beginning, this is one of the major reasons why part of what happens on teams is that we see the effect of like, oh, I wind up doing everything, is often, it's not even true. You can literally wind up with multiple people on the team who all fool themselves into thinking I do everything. And what that is, it's a failure of empathy. It's a failure of understanding. It's a failure of communication and documentation to figure out what is actually going on, who is doing what work, and what's happening. And that's the second point, which is way shorter than the first one, about the same thing, in which the thing that happens is that it is a complete dysfunction of a team, a failure of leadership, a failure of collaboration, a failure of teamwork, if, to an extent, one person is doing everything. It's a total breakdown. It is a failing of the team to execute on doing something more than one person could have done. I'll tell you the pattern I've typically seen this happen in. What happens is one person, and they may or may not be formally the leader. In any case, they have asserted themselves as to the director of what is going on or not. May or may not be in a formal leadership role in that case. And what that person will do is they will not allow things to happen that they aren't keeping a close eye on, that they couldn't do themselves, that they basically are limiting what's happening to one person worth the stuff. They're failing to really leverage and make full use of entrusting to other people. Run with it. You can do this. We trust you. You're going to do good work with it, and so on. And so what happens is they're adding friction to when someone starts to try to go further with their part, do more with their part, and it grinds them down. It jades them. It wears them out. And it's one of the many reasons that game industry, unfortunately, has a history of kind of burning people out, is folks like this who add resistance and difficulty to getting anything done as sort of a bottleneck for their inability to think, plan, and coordinate and collaborate effectively beyond themselves. It's a skill that has to be worked on in kind of the same way. And certainly for specialists in it, that, like I say, it's easy to take for granted what's happening, that the programmer's doing, or the audio person, or the artist, or whoever else on a team. It's incredibly easy for any of those people to make the same mistake about a producer, a project manager, a formalized lead or otherwise, whose work done properly to actually enable other people to do their best work and to integrate that work in as low a friction way as possible is itself a lot more specialization, effort, and energy than we necessarily see. Things we take for granted. We think, oh, they're sitting in a bunch of meetings. Hopefully those meetings are actually a pretty important part of how things come together. So the first one, again, is an effect of failing to really appreciate and understand and recognize and learn about what other people are doing, which I think is part of what makes it healthy to work through these difficulties, to mature through the process of realizing all we're not seeing, the complex, rich work we can be appreciating others are doing, which is different than what we do. Secondarily, a dysfunction of a team, a failure of leadership, communication, and collaboration to really find ways to go beyond what just one person can do by really leveraging, formalizing, structuring, documenting, coordinating, facilitating work happening at a scale that's greater than one person just sort of constantly limiting it, constantly putting a too tight a cap on it. And obviously there's an extent to which, part of the work too is make sure it can get released. That's part of that production consideration. So I don't mean to fully discount that. It's not like let everyone run free. It's about how that energy can be productively harnessed, coordinated, and collaborated, is different than just constantly putting a lid on stuff because, well, I don't know how to do that. Now, and one last little caveat towards these pieces is one of the things that can also happen is a lead or a producer or a person who essentially only feels like it's valid work if it's the work that they have done. And I see this sometimes from well-meaning folks who intend to be putting in well on a project that they are maybe leading in the club, out of which we've had 65 or more released by the time of this video. And what happens is that they get this idea that, okay, it was a slow week because I didn't do a lot. Other people on their team collaborated a bunch, got a bunch of models in, new levels done, sound effects in there, new functionality programmed. Pretty impressive stuff to show, but the lead didn't do a lot. And so because of that, can start to feel like, oh, it was a slow week. It was not a slow week. If anything, it actually is probably a better sign of leadership and of collaboration and of teamwork that every now and then there's a week when other people are driving a lot of the action, that it's not just all about what the lead has done. And I'll say that there was a factor of this too in continuing to grow and expand GameDev Club, which we are cap numbers at Dunbar's number 148. But even still, it certainly has much different dynamics now than when we started at 16 people. And one of the things that I had to get over and get past and realize is that as I was bringing on additional trainers, as I was creating more videos and self-help systems and FAQs and so on to help people coordinate and get their footing and collaborate, that there would be times when I wasn't quite as needed and as hands-on a way as I was early on. That with 16 people, my time was much more constantly manually onboarding somebody, manually answering their questions, manually doing office hours, me to them. But as it's grown and served more people, because trainers are meeting with them and they're going through automation systems and they're going through our onboarding FAQs and videos and things, that's working for more people. It's having more positive good. Even if at the time it took a while for me to get over the fact that like I felt like I wasn't being as productive. I felt like, oh, am I not needed as much? And quite the opposite. That allowed me to reallocate my energy towards more important, more strategic, more incremental improvements, more kinds of benefits for everybody. And this is again one of these things too of the lead needing to be able to recognize, understand, appreciate, contextualize. It's not all about them, not all about the work that they do. It's about the entire team, and that's should be, can be, done properly is much bigger than themselves. Anyway, that was the idea for the day. That I know those are natural questions to follow this out about the teamwork from yesterday. I want to follow this up as to if it feels like you're doing all the work, either A, you're not. Sometimes that's the case. B, if you are, it's a failure of leadership, communication, teamwork. That is a skill to be worked on that apparently is lacking if one person is doing all the work. And that can include, by the way, figuring out how to figure out is there a failing in how things are being communicated, tasks are being given, people aren't being given appropriate autonomy or respect or recognition. There's a tendency to blame this person's just lazy, this person's just bad, this person's just not doing their thing. It's a leadership failing to not figure out a correct way to make the most of that person's energy, time, level of interest, and whatever. And then thirdly, this effect again of learning to see beyond just what you as an individual are doing and learning to appreciate the bigger picture of, okay, what's actually happening? Because a lot of great things can happen that aren't necessarily every single second of you being there watching it, doing it. That's it for the day. Thanks for being here. See you tomorrow.